Hi, I'm Katie Neitz with Runner's World magazine, and recently I had to go through physical therapy for help to get over a chronic injury I was suffering from. And while I was in physical therapy, I found out that I was doing some common strength training exercises incorrectly. Now, whether you're an injured runner like myself who's trying to get better, or you're a healthy runner who's trying to get stronger, it's really, really important to do your strength training exercises with proper form. So I'm here today with my physical therapist, Craig Souders of Lehigh Valley Health Network, who's a marathon runner, and he's going to talk a little bit about the exercises that we're going to demonstrate for you today.
So if you're wondering if you have gluteal weakness, there's actually a very simple test you can do at home. All you need is a mirror. And the test that you're going to do is a single limb squat. And we'll talk about some of the things that you should look for. And if you have some of these deficits, it probably indicates that there's room for improvement and you need to do some strengthening exercises. I'm going to have Katie demonstrate some common faults that we see with this, is that the knee migrates inward compared to this bone right here or the position of your second toe. The other thing we often see is that the knee comes very far forward in relationship to the front of her foot. It really should stay back. So as she comes into the correct position, this is what we're looking for. If you look like this, that's great. Maybe you don't have that much work to do. But if you don't and you have some of those subtle movements, it really does indicate that there's room for improvement in your gluteal strength. And we've got some simple exercises that can help with that. Now that you've done your single limb squat test and you've identified that you may have some weakness in your hip, we're going to start with the most basic, probably the most important one, and also the one I think that has the most chance to make a mistake because it does appear to be such a simple exercise, and that's the clamshell. The starting position is this, and what you're simply going to do is keeping your ankles or feet together is you basically lift the knee up and away from the other knee, which is a rotational movement through your hip which targets gluteus medius to make this move happen. The mistake that most people make as the leg comes up is that the pelvis rolls back, which reduces the amount of activity that gluteus medius is doing, which is counter to what we're trying to do. So come on back down. To do it correctly, we have to roll the hips about 30 degrees forward, and you must absolutely keep the pelvis still. Now, as I hold her ankle and her hip, she's going to lift that knee up in the air, higher, 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 good, and down. And as she does that, I feel some pressure as she comes back into my hand. If you were at home without a physical therapist standing with you, the best thing to do is actually lay against a wall and do this exercise. As the hip rolls forward, the top of your gluteals or your butt should come off the wall while the bottom remains in contact. As you do the exercise, if you roll back, you'll get some contact on the top of your hip. You'll feel that as you push into the wall. You're doing the exercise incorrectly if that happens. You absolutely need to keep the pelvis forward because that's what targets gluteus medius, which is what we're after. Now that you've mastered the clamshell exercise and you're feeling stronger in your hips, we're going to go to the next progression, which is a side bridge, or sometimes called a side plank. This exercise is going to work some of your abdominal muscles, but also into your hip and your gluteal muscles as well. Again, the fundamentals are the same. We're working that stance leg and keeping our torso very, very straight. There are some common mistakes that people make with a plank, and probably the first one is that this upper arm, the hand is down on the table, helping to assist you lift into the plank. And what that does is it creates some rotation up in your torso. And again, we don't run rotated, we try to run straight. So we're going to take that hand and put it up on your hip. The other thing that's important is it's very easy to get a little bit of a bend or a C shape in your body through your hips. So you need to think about bringing your hip forward to get in a very, very straight line through your torso. When we run tall and we run straight. So we want to encourage those same positions as we do this exercise. As this exercise becomes easier and you feel good stability down here, you may want to add lifting this leg, which will force this leg to work in isolation, which is truly the functional movement for running. One leg on the ground at a time. Now that you've been practicing some of the more basic exercises on the table or the mat, it's time to progress towards a more functional movement for running, which is to get us into weight bearing. When we run, it's all about weight bearing stability in that one leg. And this is the next step to prepare these muscles very specifically for what you do when you're running. So the exercise is just a simple standing straight leg raise. The absolute important thing to realize in this exercise is the leg we're working is the leg you're standing on. It's not the leg that's moving. All of your energy and focus should be on what you're doing in this hip on the stance leg. I'm going to have Katie demonstrate some of the common mistakes that people make with this exercise, and then we'll go into the correct form. So one thing that people do is they will lean very much with their trunk. This is not how we look when we're running. We want to look straight through that torso, through that shoulder, over this bony prominence, down through the knee. The other thing that people do is that they'll throw the hip out to the side. And this is kind of a lazy way to do the exercise because we're not getting good activation out of the gluteal muscles. If we do it correctly, and she comes into a nice stable stance position, you just saw that hip elevate a little bit. Can you do that hip hike again? Just rest. That comes from contraction from this muscle right here. And I think it's helpful for patients sometimes to put their hand kind of right on that spot so you can feel that muscle contraction. As you do this exercise, and the key is moving the leg slowly, and it's not how far you move it, it's just that you move it. What you're actually focusing on is good contraction from the muscles right back here on your backside, kind of where your wallet would be, feeling those muscles contract, which is keeping your pelvis level during this exercise. We're going to look at the single limb squat, which is a very simple exercise you can do to strengthen your legs, but can also be used as a great test to see if you have a very common weakness that we find in runners, which is gluteus medius weakness, which is the muscle on the side of your hip. So I'm going to have Katie demonstrate actually kind of what not to do and what you don't want to see in a single limb squat, and that's the knee really coming inward. So what you do not want to see is this movement because it creates rotation through the thigh and then a counter rotation through the shin. And your knee is left in the middle to adapt with that and can put a lot of stress on your IT band, can give you kneecap troubles, and can also cause and contribute to the injury that Katie had, which was a hamstring problem. Now we're going to have her demonstrate this correctly, and what you really want to see, and I would recommend you do this in front of a mirror, is that the kneecap stays right over the second toe, and there's a bone right here on the front of your hip underneath your belt, and they should stay in a nice straight line. If you see that, that indicates good stability from your hip, and this is what we need your hip and these muscles to do during the running stride. As we continue to work through these strengthening moves, we're now going to take it to a further progression, which is the lunge, which is a very common exercise that many people are doing in their homes and in the gym. For the runner, again, it's very important to do this exercise correctly. What's significant about it for the runner is we're now going to take it through a much deeper range of motion than what you do in the running stride, but we want to build strength through a large amount of range of motion so that when you're running, you're able to run strong. Again, I'm going to have Katie demonstrate the wrong way to do a lunge, and I'll point some things out. And she's going to go ahead into a back lunge. And probably the biggest mistake I see people make in the gym is that they really don't get that deep into their lunge. If you look at the angle in her hip, it's kind of shallow. She's not sinking down and getting a lot of bend in that hip. The knee also comes very much far forward over the toes, and the knee migrates inward. What we want to see, and go ahead and lunge back again, is that she sinks down. Again, that bony prominence, the knee and the second toe are very much in a line, and she has a nice, almost 90-degree angle at her hip. That gets good gluteal activation. If there's weakness in your glute medius, which is very important for the runner, that knee is going to want to migrate inward. I think it's a good mental note to think about almost pushing your knee outward just a little bit. It won't move outward, but you're just going to concentrate on moving it and thinking about going that direction, and that will keep it over your second toe.